Have you ever noticed how your day slips through your fingers without you fully remembering it? You wake up, check your phone, promise yourself you'll just glance at one message, and suddenly your mind is already somewhere else. You eat breakfast while scrolling, you work while half listening to music, you talk to people while thinking about what comes next. By the time the day ends, you feel tired, yet strangely empty, as if you were busy all day but never truly there for any of it. This isn't because you're lazy, undisciplined, or broken. It's because your attention has been slowly trained to scatter. And the most dangerous part is that we've started to believe this scattered state is normal. Modern life constantly pulls your mind away from the present moment. Notifications, tabs, alerts, background noise, endless choices. Each one feels small, harmless, even useful, but together they create a mind that is never fully engaged. You try to focus, and your thoughts jump ahead. You try to relax, and your brain replays unfinished tasks. You try to enjoy something, and a part of you is already thinking about what comes after. This constant mental splitting drains energy in a way that physical work never could. You're not exhausted because you did too much. You're exhausted because you were never whole in anything you did. What makes this even more frustrating is that many people quietly blame themselves. They think something is wrong with them. They assume they lack discipline, motivation, or intelligence. But if you zoom out, you start to see a different picture. Human attention was never designed to handle this level of stimulation. For most of history, the mind focused on what was directly in front of it. Survival demanded presence. You listened carefully, watched closely, reacted fully. Fragmented attention once served a purpose, helping us detect danger in uncertain environments. Today, that same survival mechanism is being hijacked by devices and systems that profit from distraction. Your mind hasn't failed. It's been overloaded. Here's the part few people talk about. Every time your attention breaks, there's a hidden cost. Not just lost time, but lost depth. When you switch tasks, your brain doesn't reset instantly. It lingers. A part of you stays behind with the previous thought, the previous screen, the previous worry. That's why even when you sit down to do something important, it feels harder than it should. Your attention is leaking like water from a cracked container. You pour in effort, but it never fills up completely. Over time, this creates a quiet sense of frustration. You know you're capable of more, but you can't access it consistently. The most subtle damage, though, isn't productivity. It's identity. When your attention is always divided, your sense of self becomes divided too. You start living in anticipation instead of experience. You plan more than you act. You consume more than you create. You imagine versions of yourself instead of becoming one. Life turns into a series of half-felt moments. Meals lose their taste. Conversations lose their depth. Achievements feel strangely hollow. You're present enough to function, but not enough to feel fully alive. What if the problem isn't distraction itself, but the way we relate to it? What if fighting distraction head-on is the wrong approach? Most advice tells you to force focus, push harder, use more willpower. But willpower is fragile. It breaks under stress. It fades when motivation drops. And when it fails, you blame yourself again. This creates a loop: distraction, guilt, effort, burnout, distraction. The cycle repeats, quietly shaping your life. Now imagine a different approach. Imagine attention not as something you wrestle with, but something you train gently, consistently, patiently. Imagine focus not as a rigid state, but as a form of presence you return to again and again without judgment. This idea isn't new. In fact, it's ancient. Long before smartphones, long before productivity systems, there was a simple principle practiced in Japanese Zen traditions. A principle so straightforward that it almost sounds too easy. Yet when applied seriously, it changes how the mind works at its core. This principle teaches that the mind suffers not because it does too little, but because it does too much at once. That clarity doesn't come from speed, but from depth. That peace isn't found by escaping the moment, but by entering it fully. It suggests that when you give your complete attention to one action, something remarkable happens. The noise quiets. The sense of struggle softens. Time changes its texture. You stop feeling pulled in 10 directions and start feeling grounded, stable, whole. At first, this sounds abstract, almost poetic, but there's a reason this idea has survived for centuries. It works at the level where habits are formed and identities shift. It doesn't ask you to eliminate technology or escape modern life. It asks you to change how you show up to what you're already doing. One action, one moment, full attention. Not perfectly, not forever, but sincerely. Before explaining how this works, it's important to notice something within yourself. Right now, as you're reading or listening, is your mind fully here? Or is a part of it already drifting? Thinking about something else you need to do, something you want to check, something you're waiting for. There's no need to judge that, just notice it. That gentle noticing is where everything begins, because the goal isn't to eliminate wandering thoughts. The goal is to stop being carried away by them. We live in a culture that praises multitasking, but rarely questions its cost. Doing many things at once feels efficient, even impressive. But efficiency without presence creates a shallow life. You move fast, yet feel behind. You accomplish more, yet enjoy less. The ancient Japanese understood something we've forgotten. Depth creates speed later, but speed without depth creates emptiness. When you train yourself to be fully present in one thing, everything else becomes clearer. Decisions sharpen, learning accelerates. Work becomes meaningful instead of draining. This is where the real shift begins, not with a technique, but with a realization. Your attention is not just a tool, it is your life. Whatever you give it to becomes your experience. If it's constantly split, your life feels fragmented. If it's steady, your life feels grounded. The quality of your attention determines the quality of your days, and the quality of your days determines the quality of your future. In the next part, you'll see how this principle moves from philosophy into lived experience. You'll see how an ordinary person, not unusually gifted or disciplined, learned to apply this way of focusing and transformed not just how they worked, but who they became. And as that story unfolds, you may start to recognize pieces of yourself in it, because the truth is simple and quietly powerful. You don't need more time. You don't need more motivation. You need to learn how to be fully present in the time you already have. There was nothing remarkable about the person at the center of this story, and that's exactly why it matters. No special talent, no dramatic advantage, no sudden burst of motivation. Just someone who felt constantly behind, always rushing, always distracted, and quietly frustrated with themselves. They had goals, real ones, the kind that sit heavy in your chest when you think about them too long. But every time they tried to move toward those goals, something invisible pulled them away. A message, a thought, a sudden urge to check something that didn't matter. Days passed like this, then weeks, then years, until the gap between who they were and who they wanted to be started to feel permanent. What hurt the most wasn't failure. It was inconsistency. On some days, things clicked. Focus came easily. Work flowed. Progress felt real. But those days were rare and unpredictable. Most days were scattered, half-started tasks, abandoned plans, nights filled with the quiet disappointment of knowing time had been wasted again. They didn't lack intelligence or desire. They lacked control over attention, though they didn't yet have words for it. All they knew was that their mind never seemed to stay where their body was. The turning point didn't arrive as a dramatic moment. It came quietly, almost unnoticed, during a conversation that could have easily been forgotten. They were sitting across from someone older, calmer, someone who spoke slowly and listened fully. The kind of presence that made you feel, for a moment, less rushed just by being near it. As they spoke about their struggles, jumping from one complaint to another, the other person didn't interrupt. They waited, and then they asked a simple question that landed harder than expected. When you're doing something important, they asked, "Are you ever fully there?" At first, the question felt confusing. Of course they were there. They showed up. They sat at the desk. They opened the book. But the more they thought about it, the more uncomfortable the answer became. Their body was present, yes, but their mind was always elsewhere, planning, worrying, replaying, anticipating. The task in front of them was just one of many things competing for attention. The calm voice across from them explained that this divided state wasn't weakness. It was habit. A habit reinforced thousands of times a day without awareness. That's when the idea was introduced, not as a rule or a demand, but as a way of seeing. One action, full attention, nothing more, nothing less. When you read, you read. When you listen, you listen. When you work, you work. Not while thinking about the next thing, not while half escaping into distraction. Just this, just now. At first it sounded almost childish, too simple to matter. But something about the way it was said made it feel deeper than it appeared. The explanation wasn't rushed. It wasn't framed as productivity advice. It was framed as practice, a discipline of returning. The mind, they were told, will wander. That's not failure, that's nature. The practice isn't to stop wandering forever, but to notice it sooner and return more gently. Each return strengthens something invisible, like a muscle you didn't know existed. At first, it shakes, then it steadies, eventually it holds. Trying it for the first time was uncomfortable, almost painful. They sat down to work with the intention of doing only one thing. No background noise, no switching, no checking. Within seconds, resistance appeared, a restless urge, a feeling of missing out. Thoughts lined up, demanding attention. This is boring. Check your phone. You'll just take a quick break. You deserve it. The mind argued convincingly, and for a moment they almost gave in, but instead of fighting the urge, they remembered the instruction. Notice, return, no anger, no judgment, just coming back. So they did, again and again. The first few minutes felt slow, heavy, almost claustrophobic. But then something shifted, not dramatically, just enough to notice. The noise softened, the task became clearer, time stopped stretching and started moving. By the end of that first focused session, they felt something they hadn't felt in a long time. Not excitement, not pride, control, a quiet sense of being aligned. The work wasn't perfect. The distraction hadn't vanished. But something fundamental had changed. For once, they had stayed. They repeated the process the next day, and the next. Not perfectly. Some days were messy, some sessions fell apart. But slowly, consistency replaced intensity. They stopped trying to force focus and started building a rhythm. Before beginning any task, they prepared the space, removed obvious distractions, took a breath, chose one thing, and committed to it fully for a short time. Over weeks, the effects spread beyond work. Conversations felt different. They listened instead of waiting to speak. Meals slowed down. Food tasted stronger. Even walking felt richer, as if the world had gained detail. Life stopped feeling like something happening in the background while they planned the future. It started happening now. The most surprising change wasn't external, it was internal. The constant self-criticism faded. They no longer thought of themselves as someone who couldn't focus. That identity dissolved quietly, replaced by something calmer. Someone who practices attention, someone who returns, someone who doesn't panic when the mind wanders, because wandering is no longer a threat. Opportunities didn't suddenly fall from the sky. Progress still required effort, but effort felt different now. It was clean, directed, free from the drag of constant interruption. Tasks that once felt overwhelming became manageable when broken down into moments of full presence. One paragraph, one problem, one step. There was a moment, months later, when they looked back and barely recognized the person they used to be. Not because life was perfect, but because it was no longer fragmented. They weren't living 10 minutes ahead or 10 minutes behind. They were here. And from that place, growth happened naturally. This is the quiet power of the practice. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't demand belief. It reveals itself through experience. Through showing you slowly and patiently what happens when you stop dividing yourself. When you stop treating attention as something to spend carelessly and start treating it as something sacred. By the time they realized how much had changed, the change was already complete. Not because distraction was gone, but because it no longer ruled them. They had learned something most people never do. Focus isn't about force, it's about presence. And presence, once practiced, reshapes everything that follows. What most people never realize is that what feels like a personal breakthrough is often the result of a deeper biological shift taking place quietly beneath awareness. When attention is trained gently and repeatedly, the brain begins to reorganize itself. This isn't metaphorical, it's physical. Neural pathways that once fired chaotically begin to stabilize. Regions responsible for impulse control, planning, and sustained focus grow stronger through use, just like muscles responding to consistent training. Each moment of noticing distraction and returning to the present is not wasted effort. It is a signal sent to the brain, teaching it what matters. This is why the practice works even when it feels subtle, especially when it feels subtle. The mind doesn't change through dramatic moments of inspiration. It changes through repetition, through showing up again and again to the same simple act of attention. Over time, the default state of the mind shifts. What once felt effortful becomes natural. What once required constant reminders begins to happen automatically. Focus stops being something you chase and starts being something you inhabit. But this shift only becomes sustainable when it moves beyond intention and into structure. Attention doesn't exist in isolation. It responds to the environment it's placed in. A mind surrounded by constant interruption will struggle, no matter how strong the desire to focus. That's why the practice was never meant to rely on willpower alone. It was always paired with preparation, simplifying the space, removing obvious temptations, designing conditions where presence becomes the easiest option, not the hardest one. This doesn't require extreme discipline or a monk's lifestyle. It requires honesty. Honesty about what pulls you away. Honesty about how often you give your attention to things that don't deserve it. When you begin to respect your attention, your choices naturally change. You stop opening 10 tabs at once. You stop reaching for your phone without thinking. You begin to ask a quiet question before each action. Is this where I want my attention right now? As this question becomes familiar, something unexpected happens. Discipline stops feeling heavy. It no longer feels like forcing yourself to do what you don't want to do. It starts to feel like alignment. You're not pushing against yourself anymore. You're cooperating with how your mind actually works. Short periods of deep presence followed by conscious rest. One task fully engaged, then a pause. Not escape, not stimulation, just rest. This rhythm creates a sense of trust within yourself. You begin to trust that you'll return, that you don't need to grasp at every impulse, that nothing important will be lost by staying with one thing a little longer. This trust is powerful. It reduces anxiety. It quiets the background noise of unfinished thoughts. It creates space where creativity and clarity can emerge naturally. And this is where the practice moves beyond productivity into something much deeper. Presence begins to change how you experience your own life. Moments stop blurring together. You remember conversations. You remember how food tasted. You remember how it felt to solve a problem or complete a task with care. Life becomes textured again, rich, grounded. Many people chase happiness by adding more achievements, more stimulation, more distractions disguised as rewards. But attention reveals a different truth. Fulfillment doesn't come from stacking experiences. It comes from fully inhabiting the ones you already have. When you're present, even simple moments carry weight. A quiet morning, a focused hour of work, a genuine conversation. These moments don't need enhancement, they need attention. Over time, this changes how you relate to success as well. You stop obsessing over outcomes and start respecting process. You realize that progress is built in moments, not milestones. One focused session doesn't transform a life. Hundreds of them do, not through force, but through consistency, through showing up, even when motivation is low, especially then. This is why the practice endures in demanding environments. It supports long-term growth without burnout. People who cultivate attention don't necessarily work more hours, they work with more integrity. They give their full presence to what matters, and they rest without guilt when it's time to rest. This balance creates resilience. It allows effort to compound instead of collapse. As years pass, the effects become visible in ways others can sense. You speak with clarity. You listen without interruption. You move with intention. People feel seen around you, trusted. This isn't charisma, it's presence. And presence is rare in a distracted world. It stands out without trying. Perhaps the most profound shift happens internally. The constant feeling of being behind fades. You stop racing against time because you're no longer abandoning the moment you're in. Time stops feeling like something slipping away and starts feeling like something you're participating in. This doesn't mean life becomes easy. Challenges remain. Difficult emotions arise, distractions still appear, but they no longer define you. You begin to understand that attention is not something you either have or don't have. It's something you practice, something you return to. And every return is a quiet victory. Not because it makes you more productive, but because it brings you back to yourself. There is no finish line in this practice, no point where you graduate and never get distracted again. And that's not a flaw, it's the point. The practice mirrors life itself. A continual return, a continual choice to be here instead of elsewhere, to engage instead of escape, to live instead of drift. In a world that constantly pulls you outward, this inward steadiness becomes a form of strength. You stop being at the mercy of every impulse, every notification, every fleeting thought. You become someone who chooses where their attention goes. And because attention shapes experience, you begin to shape your life more deliberately. This is not about becoming rigid or serious or detached. It's about becoming available. Available to your work, available to the people you care about, available to your own experience. When attention is whole, life feels whole. And that is the quiet promise of this path. Not instant transformation, not endless productivity, but a life lived with intention, depth, and presence. One thing at a time, full attention, again and again.